Live. What's going on, everybody? Nate here, NuView Trust Company. Time for another Wednesday workshop. It's been a couple weeks with the holidays. I know we haven't had these in a while, but it's good to be back. And I hope everybody had a nice and safe holiday. I got to fly home to Seattle and see my family. So that was great. And I hope everybody's doing well today. So got a special little presentation today, or a little workshop today. We're going to talk a little bit about self-directed IRAs, of course. But really talk about it from the standpoint of how to set yourself up for success. This is good for anyone who is maybe on the fence considering about self-direction, or anybody who has, just has some money parked with NuView. They're looking for another investment. They might want to venture off into maybe some real estate deals or into anything else. And I'm going to give you a little bit of tips on how you can set yourself up for success and maximize the potential of your self-directed accounts here at NuView Trust Company. And then stick with me to the end, because I do have a little special giveaway for anybody who's on the program today, but we'll save that until the end. So let's just jump right into it. For anybody who is new to the program, we do these every Wednesday. There are Wednesday workshops. What we do at NuView Trust Company is we act as a self-directed IRA provider. We have self-directed individual retirement accounts that clients set up for themselves. I'll talk a little bit about how those work here in a second. But what we don't do, which is different than most retirement houses like a Fidelity or Charles Schwab or other places you might park your retirement funds, we don't sell investments at NuView Trust Company. We give you complete control over what you want to invest in. And when you have that control, you can venture off into all sorts of alternative investments, things like cryptocurrency, things like rental property, land. The list goes on and on. I'll talk a little bit about the investment options you have with the self-directed IRA. But since we don't sell investments to our clients, a large part of our job at NuView is educating people about how these retirement accounts work, what they're allowed to do, what you can hold inside them, and give you the best opportunity to make good investment decisions for yourself. But when you have an account here at NuView Trust Company, the keys are in your hands. That's where the self-directed piece comes into play. So you have to make sure that you understand the investments that you're getting yourself into, because NuView will never tell you that your investment's good or bad. We'll just say, yes, we'll process that, and this is what we need. So when we talk about retirement accounts or self-directed IRAs, it's important to understand what a self-directed IRA is first. IRAs are no different no matter where you go. An IRA is an individual retirement account. And why do people set those up? Because they have tremendous tax advantages. If you use them, tax advantages that we don't get as individuals. But when you throw the term self-directed in front of IRA, it doesn't change the definition or the legal meaning behind IRA. Self-direction is just a marketing term. We use that term because we don't sell investments to clients. You have to find the investment. So it is truly, in our eyes, self-directed, but it's not a different type of IRA. It's important to get that across to anybody who's watching this for the first time. An IRA at Fidelity is no different than an IRA at NuView. And most of our clients have IRAs all over the place at different custodians, because they're allowed to hold different investments with different custodians. But don't get confused with that term self-directed. IRAs are IRAs are IRAs. But why would you want this, quote, self-directed IRA? Well, a self-directed IRA, the type we have here at NuView, allows you to invest in things outside of the stock market, outside of your traditional investments like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, CDs. Those can be great investments, but those are investments that you do with your traditional banks like a Fidelity or a Charles Schwab or Wells Fargo advisors. But you have options to invest in other things. That's not your only investment choice or option that you have. Investors like to invest in things outside of that traditional investment world. And we have a lot of clients that like to buy things like real estate, rental property in their retirement account, where the income is completely tax-free or tax deferred, but it's a tangible asset instead of something like a stock. It's really up to you to decide what you want to invest in, but it is important to understand that you can hold anything in an IRA outside of two things: life insurance contracts and collectibles. Those are the only two investments that are restricted from being held in an IRA. So if you want to own rental property in an IRA, you can do it. You just have to find a company that will manage it for you. Can you lend? Can you be a hard money lender with your retirement account? Yes. You just have to find a company like NuView that will administrate those assets on your behalf. So at the bare minimum, what a self-directed IRA allows you to do is invest in alternative assets, thus giving you true diversification. But when you talk about IRAs, the biggest benefit to them is just the tax savings you get. If you're out there currently buying real estate, you understand how much taxes you have to pay at the end of the year when it comes to your capital gains tax. If you're a full-time real estate investor, you got to pay taxes on the rental income. The list goes on and on because most of us are investing into those types of investments with our own money or money we borrow from a bank, but it's personal investments. And when we invest personally, we are taxpayers on an annual basis. So it's hard to grow your own money being a taxpayer when you have to give 30, 40, 50% of your profit back to Uncle Sam each year. The IRAs or 401ks or 403bs, retirement accounts have special privileges that they get to help Americans save for retirement. And one of the things an IRA gives you is that as you buy and sell investments, whether it's stocks or real estate within the IRA, you don't have to pay taxes on an annual basis. So at a bare minimum, you can buy and sell real estate in an IRA and pay no capital gains tax. All the taxes are at a bare minimum tax deferred until you start taking distributions to yourself. So you don't have to give part of your profit each year to Uncle Sam. You get to reinvest all the capital over into the next investment, into the next investment. So you can see your bucket can grow much, much faster if you have the ability to defer taxes along the way. But there's other IRAs, like, for instance, your Roth IRA, your health savings accounts, your education savings accounts, your Roth 401k. These are accounts that not only grow tax deferred as you buy and sell investments, but if you play your cards right, when you take distributions from those accounts, the distributions are also tax-free and penalty-free if you do it right. So there's all sorts of tax advantages you get, whether it's tax deferred growth or tax-free growth, however you want to look at it, that we don't get as individuals. So if you're not utilizing these accounts to a certain degree, it's going to be hard to get to retirement spinning your wheels, paying taxes every single year on all the profit you make. But with the self-directed IRA, when you're in control, you get to invest in what you know best. I run into real estate investors and note investors all over the country that are more knowledgeable about investing in real estate than they are the stock market. So where should their retirement dollars be invested? Into something they don't understand or invested into something they do understand? And that's what a self-directed IRA allows you to do, is use your knowledge as an investor and apply your retirement dollars to that, where that knowledge base is. So if you're investing in cryptocurrency, same thing. We allow clients to use their IRAs to buy and sell cryptocurrency. It's a growing investment. I know it's speculative. However, the gains can be sizable. And if you do it in an IRA, those sizable gains are tax deferred or tax free. So there's many benefits to having just an IRA in general, but with the self-directed IRA, you get true diversification. You still get the same tax savings you do with any other IRA, but you get to invest in what you know best. And that is oftentimes the biggest life-changing ability to have. What types of plans do we have here at NuView Trust Company? We'll go over this in the investment options that we see most commonly, and then I'll talk about how to maximize your potential here with these accounts. But these are the 7 types of accounts that we have here at NuView. We have personal plans, personal IRAs, just like anywhere else. We have traditional IRAs that you could set up for yourself, or Roth IRAs. Some people would call them self-directed traditionals or self-directed Roths. By definition, they're just traditionals and Roths. But we allow you to invest in alternative assets within them. I will tell you, we have a lot of clients currently today that are setting up Roth IRAs because they're doing conversions prior to year's end. We'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about how to maximize opportunity. But we have personal plans that you could set up for yourself, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, and you can transfer and move money between those IRAs if you have those similar IRAs at another custodian. If you're self-employed, you have additional options to make contributions to and self-direct, and those would be your employer plans, which include your SEP IRAs, your simple IRAs, or even your own individual 401k. If you are a self-employed individual, you own a small business with no common law employees, these are great plans that can be self-directed, because these plans oftentimes allow for larger contributions than the traditional or the Roth. And you can basically have an item from every page on the menu if you have the income to justify it. So if you're self-employed, you can have a 401k and a Roth IRA, or a SEP IRA and a traditional IRA. It's really up to you and your income type as to what types of plans you can have. And we also have plans that are non-IRA, but they also have tax benefits. And that would be your health savings accounts and Coverdale education savings accounts. The health savings account, I would say probably the one account that I bring up oftentimes, and people say, wow, I didn't know you can self-direct an HSA. I have an HSA at Bank of America and I've never touched the money in there. It's often surprising to me how many people have HSAs that they've set up for themselves because they like that tax deduction they get by making contributions, but they don't invest it because they don't know that they can invest it, or they don't see where their investment options are. Think about owning a rental property with part ownership in your Roth IRA and your SEP IRA and your HSA, where that income's coming back to those accounts that can be used not only for retirement, but a portion of it can be used to pay for current needs like health expenses with tax-free dollars. That's where the HSA comes into play. And the Coverdale Education Savings Account is similar in nature, because the Coverdale Education Savings Account is an account that can be used to buy alternative assets, but the profit made within the account can be taken out as a distribution to pay for qualified education expenses tax-free for your kids, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, basically anybody who has education expenses that needs to get paid between kindergarten and college. You can pay those expenses with tax-free dollars made with the investments in a Coverdale Education Savings Account. Things like tuition, room and board, books, computers, iPads, tutoring, all the things that we pay for as individuals or parents that we pay out of our back pocket, which is our taxable money, can be paid instead through our investments with our tax-free money. So again, if you step back and look at these 7 plans, I would always ask myself, if I'm an investor, do I have all the plans that I can set up that I qualify for? And am I maxing out my contributions to each of these plans? Because the more money I put in these plans and the more money I invest through these plans, the less I give back to Uncle Sam. And that's really the main the component, and the main thing that drives us every morning here at NuView is we give clients the opportunity to invest in the things that they want to invest in the things that they understand, and make life-changing events in their life by eliminating or at least reducing the taxation to themselves over their lifetime. So what can you invest in with those 7 types of plans? The IRS code dictates that you can only invest in just not 2 things: life insurance contracts and collectibles. I mentioned that earlier. Anything else is fair game. So as a general rule of thumb, if you can drop a purchase contract to buy it, if you can drop an agreement to own it, that asset can be owned in the name of your IRA or in the name of your 401k. You still find the investment, but the ownership is held in the name of your IRA or 401k. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we get into a case study that I have here toward the end. What do we see most of our clients invest in? We see a lot of our clients, they like to invest in just fee simple real estate, 3-bedroom, 2-bath rental property, right? In their neighborhood, they can eyeball it. They know the area, they know contractors, whatever it may be. They like to own rental property in their IRA or IRAs. How do they find those rental properties? They might just find it through MLS, or they might go to the foreclosure. They might buy tax liens. They might buy condominiums or do real estate options, something creative. Basically, any real estate strategy that exists today can be done within an IRA and the profit be tax-free or tax deferred. Sandwich leases, I mean, the list goes on and on. Depending on how savvy of a real estate investor you are, you know the things that I'm talking about. Buying property subject to, I mean, again, not trying to get off in the weeds here, but basically rule of thumb is anything that you can invest in can be owned by your IRA, including land, commercial property, apartments. We see a lot of clients pool money together to buy, a stake in an apartment building or something like that. We have a lot of clients that buy or buy investments that are more passive, right? Maybe they're a lender. They don't have real estate that they want to buy, but maybe they have a real estate investor friend that's looking for some hard money or some financing. And they use their IRA as the financing component to that. Maybe they own a promissory note to a borrower, and that note's secured by the property through a note, deed of trust, or a mortgage. The interest payments come back to their IRA, and it's tax-free or tax-deferred, depending on the type of IRA you have. That's a good passive way to earn money and grow your retirement account without dealing with toilets or tenants. We have a lot of clients that choose to invest passively through syndications. We have investment sponsors or advisors that might be pooling money together and buying, apartment buildings or low-income housing, or, investing in opportunity zones, whatever it may be. You can use your retirement dollars to invest in those opportunities. You just have to find those opportunities. But if it's out there and if it's an available investment, rest assured your IRAs or 401ks can most likely own that. Just give us a call and we'll walk you through the process if it's an alternative asset. And a growing one, obviously, cryptocurrency. It's a big hot topic. I know it's going down today, but it seems like it has its waves. I will tell you, there's a lot of crypto investors that are going to start wishing they bought cryptocurrency in their IRAs when they start realizing the capital gains tax that comes along with selling their Bitcoin or their altcoins, whatever it may be. Again, these are just some of the investment options. The investment is really up to you to decide outside of life insurance and collectibles. So let's talk a little bit about how to maximize your self-directed IRA's potential. This workshop really comes from a conglomerate of like all the things that our clients or current clients have as far as questions when they're setting up accounts. And it's really how to best set yourself up for success with a self-directed IRA. The number one thing I tell people is if you haven't set up an account yet, don't wait to find an investment first. Get set up early, because there are some timelines you want to be aware of. If you know you want to buy real estate, don't wait to find the real estate. There's going to be problems if you're trying to backpedal and try to get everything set up that you want your IRA to own real estate and you're waiting to find the real estate first. It takes 24 hours to get an account set up. And 24 hours meaning by the time you fill out the application for the self-directed IRA, we should have it open within 24 to 48 hours. It just takes a consultation over the phone with one of my IRA specialists, but get the account set up. It doesn't cost you anything typically to get that account set up. So get it set up, talk to one of my IRA specialists, at least get step one out of the way. Step two is funding the account. How are you funding the account? How are you funding the new self-directed IRA you're setting up? Are you funding it with a transfer from Fidelity? Are you transferring money from another custodian? There's a timeline involved in that. You want to make sure that you're ahead of that timeline, not trying to work against it. If you're just transferring money from an IRA to an IRA, you have a Roth IRA at Fidelity, you just need to send some money to a Roth IRA here at NuView. Typically, that process is pretty fast. You fill out a transfer form with NuView, we fax that to Fidelity, they wire the funds back in 3 to 5 business days. If you work with other custodians, their processes might be different, and that's not something that we control. You might have a custodian that requires us to mail the transfer form with an original wet signature on it. We have all the requirements that most of the custodians ask for, but make sure that you find this information out prior to you making an offer on a property or what it may be. Make sure you get the account open and funded prior to you having to make an investment. If you're doing a rollover is just a different way to move money. Typically, a rollover is from a non-like account to a non-like account, meaning, let's say you just left your job and you had a 401k at that job. A 401k is not the same thing as an IRA, but they can be moved from one to the other, but they have to be done via what's called a rollover. A rollover is a distribution from one plan and a rollover contribution into the other. Those could take a little bit of time because, again, this is not something NuView has control over. We have to wait for your ex-employer to process that and send a check or whatever it may be, but rollovers could take longer in some cases than transfers, so just be prepared for that. Or if you're just needing to put some money into an account and make a contribution, that's typically very fast. Basically, how fast can you write a check? But are you mailing the check? You got to account for that. And there's typically a 5-day check hold if it's a personal check, if you're making a contribution. That's not our rules, that's federal rules. So again, just make sure that you at least get step 1 and step 2 out of the way. Get the account open, doesn't take much to do it. Just give us a call and get the account funded. What I usually tell people who are buying real estate, for example, if you're going to go through the process and make an offer on a property that your IRA is going to own, get the account set up so you know the vesting you're going to use on the purchase contract, but at least just put $1,000 in the account or something so that we have enough for the earnest money to come out of the account. You could transfer the rest of the funds later, but at least get that set up so that we can, if you property on the weekend, you know the vesting you need to use in your IRA, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in the case study, but you also have the money in the IRA for us to send to the title company. Anytime you're going to use your self-directed IRA to buy something, you have to work through us. We're the custodian that has to sign the documents and send the money. Right? We're not going to sell you the investment, but we have to sign on the purchase contract and actually send the money. We don't hand you the money and you go buy real estate. That would be a distribution. You have to work through the custodian to make the purchase on your behalf. So just make sure you have the account set up and you have the money in there prior to requesting us to send it somewhere. Another thing is, if you're buying real estate, are you setting up an entity prior to? Some people like to set up an LLC that their IRA owns, but the LLC is the actual entity that's going to own the property. There's no rule or regulation that says you have to do it that way. It's really up to you to decide. But if you're doing that, remember, there's going to be an added cost to that. There's going to be some added time to get that set up, but make sure you get all that set up prior to you finding a property and making an offer on it. So, and the other thing is, with the end of the year approaching, I thought it was important to bring this up. Do you need to convert to a Roth first? If you want considerations on when you should do a Roth conversion, I have some videos on YouTube on how to analyze Roth conversions, but that's something I think should always be in the back of an investor's head. Is if you've got a traditional IRA or an pre-taxed account, a SEP IRA is a pre-tax account, an old 401k is probably pre-tax. And what I mean by pre-tax is, if you're going to take your traditional IRA and buy real estate, realize the growth is going to be taxable. You don't see it as the investment grows. When you see it is when you take distributions. So always ask yourself the question, how good is this investment? How good do I feel about this investment? Should I pay taxes on the principal I'm using first, so that all the investment growth, all the profit going forward is tax-free? The way to do that is to pay taxes on your traditional IRA first and convert that to a Roth IRA. You're going to pay taxes on the principal either way. But is it better to pay taxes before you make more profit or after you make more profit? Here's the key thing with some of the legislation that's been going on, and thankfully it did not pass, which is a good thing for self-directed IRA investors, but we don't know what's going to happen in the following year. But they did keep off the income restriction, preventing people from doing Roth conversions. They were going to put an income restriction on Roth conversions, which would eliminate some people from even having the ability to do a Roth conversion based on how much you report an income. They did not put that in the current administration's plan. So thankfully, regardless of your income, you can still pay taxes on your pre-tax accounts and convert them to Roth. But if you want those taxes, if you want that distribution done in 2021 and pay the taxes in 2021 tax year, it needs to be done by this week, really, end of the year. Conversions don't work like contributions. You don't have until your tax filing deadline to do a conversion. Conversions are treated as a distribution. And if you want the taxes paid in 2021 on income generated in 2021, you have to do the distribution in 2021 or the conversion in 2021. But some people actually say, well, let me just wait until January 1st. I'll do my conversion then. And basically, if you're doing a conversion from traditional to Roth January 1st of the following year, you don't have to worry about paying taxes until 2023. So again, it gives you more time to analyze whether the conversion was the right thing to do, or prepare yourself to pay the taxes on what you convert. This isn't a Roth conversion class, but I can go on and on. Check out our Roth conversion videos on YouTube. You'll get a good an idea of when you should convert and how the conversion works. But there is a deadline coming up for this year. Number two, after you get things set up and funded, excuse me, make sure you understand. Make sure you understand the investment. This is the biggest thing that I want to get across to you guys, is that self-directed IRAs, you have to do your own due diligence. We're not responsible to tell you whether your investment is good or bad. The only thing we're allowed to do is tell you what is allowed, or what's allowed in the IRA, and what documents do we need to hold the asset in the IRA. But as far as deciding whether the investment's a good one or a bad one, I'm not at liberty to tell you that. I can look at the investment and think to myself, well, man, that's a horrible investment, or that's the greatest investment on earth. But I can't tell you that because that's not what I'm licensed to do. So make sure that you are doing all your proper due diligence before getting into any type of investment. What does that mean? If you're going to use your self-directed IRA to be a lender, make sure that you're vetting your borrowers. If you don't know how to vet borrowers, find a professional that can help you vet your borrowers. If you're buying property, have you comped out the property? Do you have professionals that can help you evaluate deals? There's nothing wrong with using your network, using your local professionals to help you evaluate deals, especially if you're a newbie. Or if you're investing into a syndication, have you vetted the investment sponsor? Have you gone on Google, seen what their reviews are? These are all things that are important for you to do with a self-directed IRA, because at the end of the day, there's only one person to blame if the investment went bad, and that is you. So make sure that you are not pointing the finger back at yourself. Make sure you're doing all your due diligence. And we do have some things coming up in the new year where you can learn about some due diligence, and I'll talk about that at the end. But make sure you understand your investment, because you're the one that is responsible for that with a self-directed IRA. Number three is, what's your exit strategy? Remember, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. I like to be a lender with my IRA. That's just something I'm comfortable with. I don't like dealing with toilets and tenants. I trust my borrowers. So, it's worked out well for me. Plus, I come from a mortgage background. I started in the business and working in the loan business. So I'm very comfortable with promissory notes and that whole lending, the financing side of it. But I'm always aware of what I'm going to do if my borrower misses payments. I'm always going to make sure that whatever state that I'm invested in, whatever state the property is in that my money's collateralized by, I'm going to make sure I understand the foreclosure process. I will tell you, there's some states I will not lend in only because I don't like the foreclosure process if the borrower doesn't pay me. And I have to plan for the worst. It could be the greatest investment on earth, right? It could be 50% LTV. Who knows? It could be the greatest investment. But if my borrower dies, because that may happen, am I willing to go through that foreclosure process? There's some states that have foreclosure processes that could take 2 years. Do you want your money, your retirement money, tied up in that process, that foreclosure process, for 2 years, and you're hit with all the holding costs and things? Because you've got to plan for the worst. Your borrower might not run away with your money, but life may happen to your borrower, so you got to account for that. If you're buying real estate, for example, have you planned out whether or not, depending on the investment, what happens if you run out of your e-liquid in the account and the property still needs to be rehabbed? Have you thought about where the extra money is going to come from? We do have some education as to how you can leverage other people's money when it comes to your retirement account owning property. There's banks that will loan your IRA money. You can go to a financial friend. Financial friends can help out in cases where you may be illiquid. But it happens from time to time where an investor will take their hard-earned retirement dollars. They'll buy a rental property. They anticipated that it's going to be $30,000 to rehab the property. They inject $30,000 and there's $10,000 more in unexpected repairs, and they don't have the money to put in their IRA. So what do? Can you make a contribution to your IRA? Do you have some more IRA funds that you can transfer over from another custodian? You make sure that you account for those things, and talk to an IRA specialist. These are all good questions that you should be thinking of prior to, just in case there's unforeseen vacancy, you can't get the house rented, or there's repairs. Because remember, everything owned in your IRA has to be paid from your IRA. So if you're illiquid in your IRA and you own property, you can't just go in and start paying for things out of your pocket because that would be prohibited. So there are some strategies on how you can, eliminate those hurdles. But remember, talk to an IRA specialist if you have questions. It's always good to plan this stuff out ahead of time. So let's talk about an actual case study, and I want to talk a little bit about timelines. I get a lot of questions, a lot of clients I run in to at events. They always say, can you talk a little bit more about the process, right? Maybe I've set up my account. I just don't understand the process. So I'm not going to go over forms, detailed forms. We have some videos online that do that. But what I want to do is at least talk about timelines. What kind of timelines can you expect from start to finish? That way you can better prepare yourself before you make an investment, or at least make an offer on an investment. We kind of talked at the beginning. The first thing you have to do, set up your IRA or set up whatever entities you need to set up that will own the property, but you still have to set up your self-directed IRA at a bare minimum. That takes no longer than 24 to 48 hours, but give our IRA specialist a call, because they are trained to ask good questions and find out if you have all the accounts set up for yourself that you would like to set up. I have a lot of clients that have traditional IRAs. They're just now learning about Roth IRAs, or they're just now learning about HSAs, or they just now learned that they can have education savings accounts for their 3 youngsters. And all those accounts can be invested together, partnered together to buy a rental property, or to own pieces of a note, or to own cryptocurrency. This case study shows you how a young family partnered 3 accounts together. So we'll get to that in a second, but make sure you set the account up and any other entities you do prior to even looking at a property. Number 2, transferring funds from a current custodian to NuView typically takes 5 to 7 business days. This is not a timeline we control. We have you fill out our transfer form. We send the transfer form to the custodian, but it's really up to them as to how fast they move. I will tell you, your Fidelities and your Charles Schwabs work really fast, right? We can send a fax to them. We've got their, information, and they do so many transfers and money in and out. It's typically 3 to 5 business days, sometimes a little more. If you're dealing with other places, and I don't want to throw names out there, but I will throw out Wells Fargo Advisors. Sometimes their timelines are very, very strict because they require a mailed copy of the transfer form with wet ink signature, and some custodians will only mail a check. Make sure you understand all those processes with your current custodian, because you don't want to be at the closing date and we're still waiting for funds. It happens from time to time, but how do you eliminate that problem? Find out ahead of time what your custodian's process is, or call us. We have a whole spreadsheet that we keep as to our experience with different custodians and what they require. So, number 2, once you have the account, or number 3, once you have the account open and funded, how long does it take us at NuView to review the investment documents? Anytime you are going to self-direct your account and buy an asset, we typically need, and I'm oversimplifying here, we typically need 2 things. We need a copy of the contract or copy of the investment agreement, and we need a direction or a purchase authorization from you. A purchase authorization is our internal form at NuView. We have a purchase authorization for real estate. We have a purchase authorization for notes. We have a purchase authorization for cryptocurrency. And these purchase authorizations are specific to the asset type. That's you, the client, giving us, your custodian, the authority to make the investment. It's no different than you hitting a button saying buy Coca-Cola stock with Fidelity. You give them that authority by hitting buy. Our buy is not a button, it's just a form. Tell us what the address of the property is, what the wiring instructions are, how much money is the earnest money, and when the funding date is. All that stuff needs to be filled out. So that gives us the authority to make the investment, but we also need to see the contracts or the agreements as well. The main thing we're looking for on the contracts is that your IRA is properly listed as the buyer or investor. Remember, this is not you buying the investment personally. You're finding the investment for your IRA, but your IRA is the owner. I'll talk about the vesting here in a second, but we're looking to make sure that the vesting is properly listed, showing your IRA as the buyer on the contracts, and to make sure that you have that purchase authorization filled out to us before we can do anything. Okay, so step 3, give us the contracts and purchase authorizations. That typically takes at least 48 hours for us to review and make sure that everything's good to go. From that point on, our transactions department will work with the title company or work with whoever's involved to make sure everything's signed and T's are crossed and I's are dotted. But if you have something that has moving parts like real estate, and for instance, you have contractors that need to get paid even after the property is closed on, remember that money has to come out of your IRA as well. We pay contractors right out of the IRA. We pay bill payments out of the IRA. We pay property taxes out of the IRA. But remember, that has to come through us and that has to be requested by you. So we have it. All we require is send us a copy of the invoice. Again, that's the agreement. Send us a copy of the invoice and give us a payment authorization. Again, you're always going to submit at least those 2 things to us before we can do anything. But remember, it takes at least 24 to 40 hours for us to process that. So make sure you just get that to us ahead of time. As long as you do all that and you get set up ahead of time, you should be good to go. So here is an example of a couple clients that we have, 3 clients actually, Robert and Linda, who are husband and wife. They both had NuView Roth IRAs that they transferred from Fidelity. And they also set up a Coverdale education account for their 9-year-old son. They made a couple years contributions to the plan. The Coverdale education account, just to give you an example, it's similar to a 529 plan. If you're familiar with the 529 plan, it's an education savings account. However, what you can use the Coverdale to pay for as far as expenses is a lot more broad than the 529 plan. The 529 plan used to be just for college expenses. They expanded it recently, but it used to be just a college savings plan. What do you do in high school, junior high, or prior to that? If your kids are going to private school, right? Tuition, uniforms, all that stuff, it can be pretty expensive. The Coverdale education account has been around for a long time. It's just not many people know about it, but it's an account that you can use and you can put money in it and you can invest. But the profit can be taken out of the account to pay for those qualified education expenses. So they had set up an account for their son. They made a couple years contributions to the plan, and they wanted that account with their own Roth IRAs to go and buy a rental or a rental property that they ended up flipping that was in their neighborhood. The purchase price on this property was $100,000, and they anticipated that there was going to be about $30,000 in repair. So we'll just rough estimate $130,000. The percentages there that I have are very important. Okay. When you're partnering IRAs together, make sure you have enough capital that those IRAs or ESAs can make the investment, but also that those accounts have enough in reserves to pay for the expenses. Because when you own a property partnered with your own IRAs or own accounts, the money that's invested, that's going to give it an ownership percentage. So you're going to have to do a little math here prior to and make sure you've got enough to make the investment on all the accounts you want to use, but enough in reserve as well, based on their ownership percentage. So Linda and her husband, they did all the math. They realized, okay, we've got enough money to make the offer and buy the property, and then we have enough in estimated repairs to cover it from all 3 accounts. Husband's Roth ended up owning 60% of the property. So in total, it put $78,000 into the investment. Wife's Roth IRA owned 35% of the property. It ended up putting up $45,500 in the investment. And their son's Coverdale owned 5% of the investment for a whopping total of $6,500. Now, why did they do this? Because it's money sitting there and it has to be invested. All these accounts grow completely tax-free. And this is a good way to get those Coverdales involved in an investment, because it's hard to make investments with a small Coverdale on its own. The best way to get those things rolling is to partner it with your own accounts based on whatever investments that you're finding. So when I talked about the vesting is very important. Okay. And here's an example of the vesting. And the vesting is the actual buyer that you're going to use on the purchase contract. It's going to be the owner of record on the warranty deed if we're taking title to it in direct ownership of the IRAs. what I tell people, it's no different than the stock certificate you own at Fidelity. If they ever sent it to you, right, you own Coca-Cola stock and it's bought in your Fidelity IRA, the ownership doesn't say you, John Smith. It says Fidelity Investments, FBO, John Smith's account number. It's no different at NuView when we're buying real estate, but the owner of record and the buyer is going to be NuView Trust Company, FBO, your name and account number. If there's multiple IRAs, it's going to list all those buyers. If you're setting up an entity first, that changes things a little bit, because if you set up an LLC, for example, and the LLC is going to be the owner of the property, well, the IRAs and ESAs have to own the LLC. So it's the same process. We're just going to have those ownership percentages, but they're going to own an LLC and the LLC is going to own the property. Hopefully that's not too confusing for you guys. But here is how they drew up the contract and how the deed actually read when we were done with the property. That NuView Trust Company, FBO, Robert Jones, Roth IRA account number 12345, as to the undivided interest of 60%. So his Roth IRA owns 60% of the property. His wife Linda's IRA owned 35% of the property, and their son's, that says Roth IRA, but I meant to put ESA, ESA owned 5% of the property. Those percentages are important because expenses need to be paid based on those percentages, but then profit also needs to be split based on those percentages as well. It works really easy if all the accounts are here at NuView. For instance, when they rented this property out, we know that that property is owned by 3 different accounts. The renter doesn't have to send 3 different checks. They just send one check to NuView if they're a renter. That check gets split pro rata based on their ownership percentages. Okay, no big deal. If we're paying a contractor, same thing. You just give us an invoice of contractor Bob that we're paying. And as long as we see that those 3 accounts own the property and there's enough money in each account, we're just going to take the ownership percentage of that payment and send that to contractor Bob, one check. Okay. So moving on, they did pretty well on this investment. They ended up holding it for 4 months. They sold it. They actually, I think they rented it for 1 month just to a small short-term tenant. But they had a net proceeds pretty good of $180,000, giving them a tax-free gain of about $50,000. I have that doubled up by accident, but they bought it and rehabbed it for 130, sold it for 180, giving them a capital gain of 50,000. But remember, since this is in a Roth IRA and an ESA, the capital gain is completely tax-free. There's no capital gains tax involved. So that $50,000 profit gets split based on the ownership percentages. So 60% of the profit goes to the husband's Roth IRA. That's $30,000 tax-free. Wife's Roth got 35%, which was $17,500 tax-free. And their son's ESA got $2,500 tax-free. And the difference between that account versus the Roths, typically you get all your tax benefit once you are above the age of 59 and a half. That's when all of your earnings in your Roth IRAs become completely tax-free. As long as you have the Roth open for 5 years and you're above the age of 59 and a half, your Roth IRA turns into a magical tax-free bucket that can be used to invest for the rest of your lifetime. And you could take distributions tax-free and penalty-free for the rest of your life. With the ESA, you don't have to wait until a certain age. If their son has education expenses that need to get paid that year, they can take that $2,500 out tax-free and pay for tuition or buy an iPad or pay for tutoring or buy uniforms if he's going to private school. The list of education expenses that can be paid are really broad. The difference of doing it that way is if they were paying that same $2,500 and they had to pay $2,500 for tuition, for example, but they're using their earnings from their job, well, they have to go make more than $2,500 to pay $2,500 of expenses because they're taxpayers. So a better way to pay for things you have to pay for anyways, find a way to pay it tax-free versus taxable. And this is a great example of how this family did that. What I don't want you guys to be is this person. And we get this person a lot, not picking on anybody, but we get these calls a lot. You would be surprised. Somebody calls and says, "Hi, NuView. I just found a property. I put an offer on the property. I told them I can close by next Wednesday, but I still need to set up an account." Woo, man, that is like nails on a chalkboard to us. Have we done it? Have we worked miracles before and got accounts set up, got the contracts changed between their personal name to their IRA, got money switched out from their IRA to them personally, and got it all done? Yeah, but it's not the way we like to live our lives. Make sure that you get this stuff set up ahead of time. Don't put our transactions team in a bind like that, because the chances of you getting let down are higher. The chances of you getting let down if you get everything set up are very, very small. So just don't be that person that waits and waits. Get the account set up. Doesn't cost anything to get it set up. At least get enough money in the account if you're going to buy real estate. Put some earnest money in there. Put something in there. Your contribution deadlines are coming up. Put a contribution in there. If you're not making any money in your Fidelity account, make the contribution to your NuView account. You're not going to lose any money because we don't invest it, so it's going to sit there like a rock. So make sure you make those contributions. I will remind people, you've got deadline contributions for your 401ks. If you have solo 401ks, that deadline is the end of this year. But for pretty much all other accounts, your traditionals, your Roths, your ESAs, your HSAs, those contribution deadlines are April 15th, or tax filing deadline. But I will say a lot of clients, what they'll do is once January 1st rolls around, if they're making their prior year contribution, they go ahead and make current year contribution too, because you can make current year and prior year contribution between January 1st and April 15th. You may need to do that if you need more capital or more buying power in your IRA. So again, it just depends on what you're investing in, but that's a good time to double up on your contributions. Couple last notes I want to make is when you're looking at maximizing your self-directed IRA, make sure that you're preserving your tax-free dollars while making safe investments. You make safe investments by doing due diligence, but also look for other opportunities to preserve your tax-free dollars. One easy way to preserve your tax-free dollars is when you set up an account. There's administration fees that we charge for holding assets in an IRA and processing investments. We don't make commissions on any investments, but we do have to keep the lights on with small transactional fees. But if you're going to pay those fees, those are the one fees that can be paid outside of your IRA dollars. It's an IRA expense. It's not an asset expense. So for the administration costs of your IRAs, pay those with a credit card. Why would you want us to take money out of your Roth IRA just to go to fees? Keep those dollars growing tax-free in there. Keep those dollars growing exponentially and compounding on themselves. There's no better way to build wealth than build it in a tax-free environment. And those pesky little administration fees, pay them with a credit card. Put them on your Alaska Airlines credit card and build some points on there, or write it off as an expense if you're self-employed. But pay those fees outside of your IRA through a credit card or some other means. So I think that's just very important to think about. Excuse me. And use leverage to gain a competitive advantage. I've done a lot of classes on leverage. I love talking about leverage. But there's with the self-directed IRA, there's some unique opportunities to use leverage. One is leveraging your network. That's not something that you often get to talk about when you're buying and selling stocks. Leverage your network. If you're a real estate investor, leverage your local RIAs. Do you have deals? Do you have access to deals? That's a great place to find access to deals, is through your local real estate investor associations. There's a lot of investor groups online. Be careful. Make sure that you're not being scammed online. That just happens. It's just the day and age that we're in. But there's a lot of good, great education and investor groups on Facebook, for example. You can learn a lot. You can find deals. You can pitch your deals, but make sure that you're leveraging your network. We have a great opportunity coming up January 6th, January 7th, which I'm going to talk about next, which is our NuView Annual Investor Retreat. What a great opportunity to get education, meet some people, rub elbows with local and national investors on a large stage, and have a lot of fun. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but that's a way to increase or develop your network. Leverage your experience or the experience of others. Again, that's where self-directed comes in, is most powerful, is when you can leverage your own experience, whether you're a real estate investor, a mineral rights investor, an oil and gas investor. Leverage your knowledge and apply it to your retirement accounts, and you'll find you'll make yourself better returns in the long run. Time is also often on your side with an IRA. So don't pass up on investments because they don't pay off today. If it's an investment that pays off later down the road, what a great opportunity to put that investment on the shelf in your IRA, because depending on your age, you may have to wait a little while to reap the tax-free benefits with an IRA. So take those investments that pay off later, put those on the shelf in your IRA. And if you're an active investor looking to put food on the table, do the investments that pay quicker in your name, right? You don't have to do one or the other, but you should really maximize both, especially if you're an active investor, and make sure you understand how to leverage other people's money. There are banks that have IRA loans. If you need financing to help buy property, if you want to spread your dollars out and buy 3 properties instead of 1, there's banks out there that have IRA non-recourse loans. Do a lot of classes on that. Other people's money could be other people's IRAs. Leverage other people's IRAs. We have NuView clients that will partner together on deals because it increases their buying power, or maybe they partner together on a note. How do you do that though? How do you meet people that you want to partner with? Come to an event like this. And this is kind of where I want to end up on, is make sure that you come to events like this. If you can't make it to this one, we'll have another one, but if you can make it to this one, make sure you come to this one. This is going to be our very first annual investor retreat. We call it the Investors Retreat because we're holding it Thursday, Friday. We have a lot of people that like to fly in and go to the parks, Universal and Disney World. So we want to leave the weekend open for you guys to do that. But we have a great list of speakers speaking Thursday and Friday. It's a 2-day event from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We even have a little fun time afterwards on day one. We are giving, or I am giving, a couple free tickets if you guys are interested. This is almost your last opportunity until the event is next week. It's next Thursday, just over a week away. Have a few free tickets that I can give out. We're close to 300 people registered for this, and that doesn't include the sponsors and the vendors that are going to be there as well. If you scan that QR code, you can get more information on the event. But let's just talk a little bit about the speakers, just so you guys have an idea who's coming and who's speaking. Dave Steck, great motivational speaker, but he speaks from experience. He is a big proponent of self-directed IRAs. He's been using self-directed IRAs to increase the tax-free wealth of not only himself, but his family, his sons. He started as a lender using his self-directed IRAs. He's branched out into buying and owning real estate, buying and owning cryptocurrency, buying and owning companies through angel investing. He does a lot with self-directed IRAs, and he's going to kick off day one with a little motivational talk of how he's made millions and millions and millions of dollars through his self-directed IRAs for not only himself, but his family as well. Greg Bond, if you're a local real estate investor in the Orlando area, you probably know Greg Bond. Big active investor. You see him a lot at CFRI. He teaches his own self-directed IRA courses, which are great. He is going to talk about how he took his $50,000 IRA years ago, and as soon as he started self-directing it into real estate, which is what he was familiar in, he's grown that $50,000 IRA to a $3 million IRA. He's going to tell you how he did that, and that's going to be from the client perspective. We're going to have an actual client, an actual investor, tell you how he did it from step one to where he's at now. Brad Summerall, a good friend of mine, he is coming out. He's a nationally renowned apartment investor. He does education. He's got his he does his own events. He's been named the National Apartment Investor of the Year twice, I believe. He's going to talk about the future of investing in apartments going forward. Al Nicoletti, a good friend of mine in Jacksonville. If you go to the Jacksonville area, a great guy to know. He's an attorney. Don't hold that against him, but he's an attorney that talks investor language, which is awesome. He talks about probate, talks about asset protection, but he's investor friendly when it comes to real estate investments. Big educator. He's got a big presence on YouTube. Great guy, great energy. He's going to talk from a legal perspective on how you can protect your assets and opportunities that you might not have seen otherwise through investment opportunities through things like probate. Tom Berry, a good friend of mine from Texas, is coming out. He's going to talk about due diligence when it comes to real estate investing. He has a tremendous track record when it comes to real estate investing and lending. He's the owner and CEO of Investor Loan Source. It's a hard money lending company, but he started his career in real estate. He's bought everything from small properties to big properties. The list goes on and on. Tremendous amount of knowledge. And then again, a good friend of mine, Ed Pugh from Charlotte, owner of CLT Buyers. Tremendous individual, does a lot of educating in Charlotte about buying off-market properties. He's familiar with self-directed IRAs. He uses them to buy some of his properties. Great list of speakers. And this is just day one. Day two, Augie Bailot, another local real estate investor. He's going to talk about how you can bulletproof your self-directed IRA lending. So day two will be more on the lending side and talk a little bit more of alternative investments. Day one will be more real estate. Jim McSorley is another client. He invests in cryptocurrency. Desi Arnaz, another nationally renowned note investor, is going to talk about buying notes in your self-directed IRAs. Ryan Gibson from Spartan Investment Group. He's going to be talking. Mike Stewart from JWB, Jason Matthews. They're out in Tampa. They're going to talk about short-term rentals. And John Denza, a good buddy of mine from Eris X, is going to also be talking about the future of cryptocurrency and how you can apply those investments to your self-directed IRAs. Here's a quick look at the rundown of the agenda if you're interested. We go from 9 to 5 both days. We do have an evening social on Thursday, and that's sponsored by Joe Siegel, a local attorney here that works with a lot of our clients in setting up their checkbook control LLCs. So again, all these people are going to be at this 2-day event. If you're not coming down, if you're sitting at home and you're not getting out there and meeting some of these people and all the audience that they're going to attract, I would say you're missing a huge opportunity. And even if you know it all, if you're somebody that says, I know all that stuff already, does it help to meet 300 more people that you didn't know before and increase your network? This is a great opportunity for you guys to not only learn, get educated, but meet people, increase your network. And we're going to have a lot of fun at the same time too. We're going to have a cocktail hour the evening of, so it's going to be a great day. We have a room block at the hotel, which is the DoubleTree Hilton at Universal. If you need more information on the event, let us know. But right now I've got 10 tickets. I got 10 tickets that I can give away. They are general admission tickets. And what I want you to do is, if you want one of these 10 tickets, complimentary, okay, these tickets run for $199 each. But if you want complimentary tickets, what I want you to do is email that email down at the bottom there, IRA specialists at NuViewTrust.com. Just say, I want my free ticket. If you want a +1, just say, I want my free ticket +1. Give us your name, your phone number, and your email. We'll have your email when you send it in, and we'll get you registered and we'll get you those free tickets. This is your last chance, guys. The event's next week. So if you're local, good thing for you guys. It's right in the heart of Orlando at the DoubleTree at Hilton Universal. I'm going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope to see all you guys there. Also, if you have any questions on the presentation, go ahead and email those to IRA specialists at NuViewTrust.com. That's kind of your one-stop shop for anything you need when it comes to self-directed IRA, education, knowledge. You need to set up an account, or you just need your free tickets. Shoot us an email. Say, I want my free tickets +1, +2, +3, whatever it is. We've got 10, so they're going fast. I hope I see you guys there. And I hope this was helpful to you guys on a Wednesday. Have a great rest of the afternoon, and I will see you guys hopefully January 6th, January 7th. Have a great afternoon. Bye, everybody.